Hi everyone, hope everybody's well and fit. Half the battle with making these videos is picking a subject. I can spend more time and effort in doing that than actually building the kit, for me anyway. So I managed to whittle it down to 3 kits that have been sat on the shelf gathering dust for many years. Sea Venom, the canopy on this needs replacing, so I'd have to build something up and then backform a new canopy for it. So I don't think there's an aftermarket. I could be wrong. The other one is a camera. So I finally chose the Meteor, the Night Fighter variant. Out of all the Meteor family, this is the one I like. I used to have all the classic airframe variants, but over the years I've flogged them on and passed them on and was just left with this one. So the idea was to build it straight from the box, not add anything to it, and build it in the Suez markings. But as I got into the build, I thought to myself, it just seemed such a waste of a nice kit, or subject should I say, just to pick one of the 3 options in the box. That's where I ended up picking the target towing version. Now, along with the additional bits that I would have to recreate to build that variant, while I was getting into the build, there were certain areas within the Classic Airframes kit that lacked finesse. Some beautiful resin parts, but areas like the undercarriage just lacked detail. So I was wondering whether I could cannibalise another kit with a Classic Airframes kit, i.e. one of the Airfix range of Meteors. Now just a point to note that through the video I may use the abbreviation CA. I'm on about Classic Airframes, not super glue. So once again I want to thank you for watching, and I do hope you like what I did with this cut and shut Meteor. See you later. So let's have a look at what we get in the box. We get markings for 3 options. And I think the Suez one looks pretty good to me. We also get a stencil guide. The decal sheets look beautiful. Crisp, clear and very thin. The only criticism I would say is that the blue on the roundels looks a bit too pale for my liking. We have our typical CA instructions. The parts, as we expect with a kit like this, slightly crude, although the surface detail, the recessed panel lines, are nice and sharp. And of course the bag of resin parts which makes these kits. Beautifully cast, beautifully detailed. Yeah, that's going to be fun, releasing these parts from the block. The clear parts, they look okay. I'll leave them in the bag for now and take a detailed look later on. So the first task I'm going to do is to release all the resin parts and clean them up. As always, when releasing resin parts, I use a lot of water. just to keep the resin dust down to a minimum. After I've released and cleaned the resin part up, I'll put it in a tub of water. I do this to stop the resin residue from drying out. I can rinse and wash all the residue off in one go. Now there are some resin parts where I don't need to release from the block, there's no need. And some of the smaller parts, I'll release them as and when I need them. Next, more sanding and cleaning, this time of the plastic parts. Now I was looking at the undercarriage bay and the undercarriage legs, and the detail is very soft. Now back some time when I wrote a full build article of one of the Airfix Meteors, and an idea came into my head that maybe if I bought the Airfix Meteor, the undercarriage detail would be a lot better. So I quickly thumbed through the article. And as always with me, I keep the instructions of every kit I build. So I dug out the instructions and looked at the illustrations to see what the quality of the parts were like. And of course they were far superior than the CA kits. So I decided to buy one of the Airfix Meteors as a donor kit to replace some of the parts of the CA kits. I may even be able to replace the intakes and the external fuel tanks as well as the undercarriage. I used to have both sets of the Barracuda cast intakes, both small and large, but for some unknown reason I could only find the small ones. At the same time, while thumbing through this excellent book, I came across the Mk20 Meteor, target towing version. Instantly I knew that this is the one I wanted to make, not only for the colour, but for the additional parts as well that would add to the Meteor. So it was alright picking this version, but I knew in the back of my head that there'd be a lot more work involved in what is and will be an already intensive build as is. So the first thing I want to do is to replicate the additional parts. So I've taken a measurement off the CA kit's tail, drawn that size box on the computer, and then using a scanned image enlarged it to fit that box. So once I was happy with the size of the scanned image, I've done a rough outline of the winch and the target bridle. So this will give me the size and all the angles and dangles that I need. So then I've glued the copy of the winch onto some sheets of plastic, and now I've got a good guide to create this shape. Now for the bridle, which is very complex, but what I do with things like this is break them down into basic shapes. So you can see here in this shot how I've broken down the target bridle. So I'm going to attach the winch to the pylon. As for the prop, I'll leave that off and attach it later. Well, Christmas came at once today, even though I had to pay for it, I got my extra decals sheet for the Mk20. Number of options on this sheet. The decals look beautiful. And also I got the donor kit. And I did forget how good this kit is. So I'm just going to show you a few shots of some of the parts I'm going to be replacing. A comparison with the CA kit and the Airfix kit. Now there's no criticism here. With a bit of time and a bit of effort, I could clean these CA parts up to look pretty good. But it's just a quick and easy fix. It's cost me, but it's a quick and easy fix. I'm also considering replacing the CA kit's tail with the Airfix one. So I'm going to start by building the Airfix Undercarriage Bay. I'd thought of using the Airfix wing on the CA kit, but the amount of work needed put that idea completely in the bin. With the Airfix framework dry, I've trimmed it to shape. Which means I need to modify the CA lower wing. So you can see here I've had to scrape quite a bit of plastic round for the Airfix framework to sit in. So I've got the Airfix Wheelbase assemblies fit nicely on the lower wing, and I had to take quite a bit of excess off on the upper CA wing, just so it all encloses properly. I've also used the lower wing of the Airfix kit to drill out the holes for the lower fuel tanks. Now I'm just going to add a bit more definition to the ailerons on the CA parts. Just a bit more depth. Now the upper wing on the CA kit comes in two parts, well 4 parts altogether. So I'm just going to use the lower wing as a jig and glue the 2 parts together, creating one assembly. You can see here, if you look closely, where I drilled out a hole for the landing lights. It seems on the Mk20 there were no landing lights on the wing. So I'm going to add the painted Airfix Wheelbase to the CA lower fuselage. And I've just bolted it up by using some plastic card. I don't want these things popping out of position. So now I'm gluing the upper assembly wings to the lower, starting off with the alignment of the rear exhaust and then working my way around. So I'm going to place the rear exhaust now. I've added some plastic card, bonded some plastic card to the resin part. I'm going to drop these in, and once I've got the alignment right, I shall fix it into place with some plastic shims. Now you can see here I've left the leading edge of the wing unglued. I want to make sure I got the front of the engine in position first. Once I was happy with that, then close the wing up. Now for the intakes, I've got the CA splitters attached to the Airfix intakes. Very nice fit, almost made for each other. So the Airfix intake to the CA wing is not a bad fit considering. A few gaps here and there. So I've filled all them in with sprue glue and scraping the excess off now. Once that's done, sanded smooth, and of course with all that work around that area I've had to rescribe some of the panel lines back in. Now kitting this scale, I need to do the navigation lights. They're just moulded plastic with the CA kit. So using the Trumpeter BF19 parts, trimmed the lights down, glued them in place and done the usual. Smothered it in putty, let it dry and then sanded it, blended it smooth. One thing I noticed on the ailerons is that the tabs are wrong. They're too small and they're flush, and they should be a lot longer and stick out. So I've created a template to cut out the right shape, then created new tabs using plastic card. Next I'm going to get on with the cockpit area. All the resin parts have been cleaned up and washed. First coat will be a Tamiya black. And then using a NATO black, I've just sprayed from above just to give a slight highlight. And then using this wonderful stuff, I've highlighted all the detail by dry brushing. Then after that, I've picked out some of the detail with paint. This is all then sealed in with a coat of Tamiya clear. One thing missing, and you don't always get it with kits, are the harnesses. Now these seats, I think they're actually hurricane seats. I stand corrected on that. So there's no ejection seats in this Mark 20. It's literally all strapped in, and if you need to get out, you're in trouble. So I was considering and looking at buying some Hawker Hurricane harnesses, but they're not quite right. So I've created my own and tried to do a quick fix by printing them out on some Tamiya tape, which didn't work at all. So I've ended up going and creating them and cutting them out on paper. So now I'm ready to assemble both the cockpit tubs. Now the instructions are a bit vague here, so I ended up doing a lot of dry fitting before I was reasonably happy where these parts went. The top harnesses go with some bars, so some additional work was required around here. Because some of the resin around here is very flimsy, I've held everything in place with some Tamiya masking tape. Once again, I don't want anything breaking loose inside the cockpit once I've assembled it all. Now I was going to use the Airfix front console. It's got a lot more detail on it, but for me it just didn't seem to blend in. It stood out too much, so I've reverted back to the CA part. So I'm going to give you a quick comparison of the Airfix and the CA fuselage parts. You can see around the wing area it goes pear-shaped, but other than that they seem to be the same length. But this is where it goes pear-shaped a bit. The cross section of the Airfix and the CA parts is different. There's about a good millimetre difference, if not more. But as you can see here, I jumped straight in and decided to change the whole rear fuselage. I chose a frame at the end of the wing and just went for it. Fortune favours the brave, they say. All the stupid. So as I hacked the rear fuselage off and tried to pair them up, I found out that panel lines it didn't match up. I'd have to rescribe the whole of the rear fuselage. Not a lot of work, but enough to put me off. So I ended up gluing these parts back together again. Oh joy. So I decided to cut off at a frame where there's no panel lines I'd have to match up. But the issue I've got here is that the cross section is quite a bit different. So you can see the solid line is the CA kit and the dotted line is the Airfix kit. So I've got quite a step, and the only way of solving that is by pushing the rear assembly back. Now providing it's not too much, I might get away with it. If it's quite a bit, it might look odd visually. Now just a point to note, you can see where I've cut plumb, but the actual panel line on the CA kit is at an angle. So this is how much plastic card I've had to add to extend it so I can get it to blend in properly. But before I can do that, there's a few things I need to do first. First is add the nose parts, rescribe the lost detail, and then more importantly, add that nose weight. It's essential. Next, with the fuselage halves sellotaped together, not glued, I want to dry fit the cockpit assemblies. But before I can do that, I need to add the Airfix nose gear to the CA resin tub. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of difference with the cross section, as I've mentioned before. So I need to trim down the Airfix part. So I've glued the Airfix nose assembly to the CA cockpit tub, and because it's a weak joint there, I've just bolstered it up, give it a bit more strength using a bit of plastic card, as you can see here. So you can see here where I've dry fitted the rear assembly tub, and then I've marked off in pencil where I need the front assembly tub to line up, and hopefully the Airfix nose gear will all line up as well through the CA nose gear bay. Hunky dory, we're laughing, all works. With that in position, you can see I've glued it in position on one side of the fuselage using some plastic card, just to hold it in place. I will do the same for the rear cockpit assembly tub. So now that I'm happy that both resin tubs are seated nicely with the fuselage closed, I can unstrap the fuselage half and then bolster both those resin tubs with a bit of plastic card. So the wing and fuselage all sanded and cleaned up, I can now add that rear tail at long last. Now I can't add it just like this, it's a weak point. So I need to add strength to this area, and I've done that by adding some plastic rod. Canopy parts, the detail here is very soft, it fades in and out, and they will also need to be brightened up by dipping in Johnson's Clear. Now because the framework's a bit vague around here, I've used a 1/72 scale mask, blown it up to 1/48. Now this 1/72 scale scaled up mask won't match the CA kit parts. That'd be asking too much, but it gives me a good starting point. Now I could use the mask that I've cut underneath, but I found with care, if I peel back gently, I can use the masks that have been cut on the paper. So you can see visually here how much of a difference there was between the mask and the CA framework. So I've done one side, I'll flip it over and do the other side, and then that gives me my spatial awareness for adding the top masks. One thing I forgot to add was the essential fuel tank, the Airfix one. It wasn't a bad fit considering that the parts are from two different kits, but just a bit of fettling here and there. So now I think I'm happy, I've got as far as I want. I'm going to paint the whole model in Tamiya flat black. This does two things. One, it lets me know of any imperfections on the surface, which I will rectify and then paint over with matte black again. And secondly, when I come to paint the silver paint, whatever paint I use, it helps me see the coverage of the silver paint. So if there's any black showing through, I know I need to add a bit more to that area. So with all the imperfections dealt with, I'm going to give a light wet sand to the whole surface. This will get rid of any loose dry paint on the surface and also prep the surface and give me a better finish when I add the silver paint. Smooth. So with the surface all thoroughly clean and dry, very dry, I'm going to apply this superb stuff.
My go-to silver. Robust and easy to apply. I don't know whether I've got the tone right or the colour right, but this stuff is idiot proof, as you can see. So having let that silver dry for at least 2 or 3 days, no rush, let it set off, go off, whatever it has to do, let it settle. I need to apply the yellow now. Now there's a lot going on here underneath as well as on top. But before I can add the yellow, I need to add the white. But before I can add the white, I need to mask off all those areas. Fun times. So with the white applied, I've applied a Tamiya yellow. And once again, I've let that paint go off, dry properly before I do a light wet sand. So now I'm going to apply the black stripes, and this is a nightmare because if you get this wrong, it's going to look odd and then it's going to be agony city to go back and redo it all. So I've used an image, blown it up to 1/48 scale or to the scale of the kit, taped it in position, and then using frog tape cut to the same width as the black stripes, light across those empty spaces. This is going to give me a rough guide of the angles and the spacing. Once I'm happy I've got them in position, I'll trim the green tape to shape and then gently take off that cutout template. With the template removed, I just tidy up a bit with some frog tape just to make sure I've got it all right. And then I filled in those spaces with some Tamiya tape. Once I'm happy with that, I've peeled all the frog tape off. One thing to note is that I've added another stripe nearer the nose. On the actual paint guide, it doesn't have that. So for this mark, it may not have had it, but it looked odd to me. So I've added it. Artistic license. So for the black, I've created a custom mix. It's just Tamiya black with a bit of NATO black, just to tone it down a bit. That's then applied all over the surface. Let it dry thoroughly, and then the great reveal. This is where you find out where you're going to throw the model in the bin, or there's a smile on your face that you've got away with it. Phew, right, I'm happy with that. There's a few little oversprays here and there and a few little imperfections, but other than that, the gist of it looks okay to me. So I've got the central fuel tank to paint silver, but I'm going to do that along with the leading edge that needs painting silver as well. There's a slight bleed underneath the wing. Now I found with AK's metal, in particular, that the Tamiya masking tape sometimes leaves a residue. Sometimes you can't see it as well, so something to bear in mind. But with a bit of soapy water and a gentle rubbing, it comes off quite nicely. So that's the central tank and the leading edges all painted silver. Next thing we do is break up the surface of the black and the yellow. Using citadel paints and creating a lighter shade, I'm just going to pick out some panels on the yellow and on the black. Next I'm going to do some wet sanding, mainly over the areas where I'm going to add decals. So just to try and make that surface as smooth as possible. I'm not going to do the whole model. Next I need to break up the upper surface of the silver. Most Meteors look fairly clean with the odd panel here and there. So the goal here is to break up the surface, but do it subtly. If it's too much, it looks odd. So I want to break it up so if you catch it in a certain light, you can see there's a difference in shade or tone. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to use two methods. I'm going to use oils and Mr. Hobbies metallic aluminium. So with the oil, I'm going to create a very light grey. I'm going to mask off the relevant panel and then apply it very sparingly here and there, mainly to the edge, but that's up to you where you want to apply it. With that applied, I'll blend it all in with a cotton wool bud or a stiff dry brush. No laughing in the cheap seats, please. The next method is using Mr. Hobbies Metallizer. Just a small amount on a brush, added here and there, and then that's blended in with a cotton wool blood or a cloth. So now I'm going to apply those two methods to the Meteor. Once again, try not to go overboard. It's so easy to do that. I keep calling this stuff Mr. Metallizer. It's Mr. Metal Colour. And one thing to bear in mind with this stuff, it gets everywhere. While I was masking off the radome to apply the paint, I found when the paint dried that there was a seam showing. So a bit of remedial work was needed here. I also found, and I don't know why, maybe over a period of days and the heat, that there was a seam on the fuselage which appeared. So that needed addressing as well. By using these two simple methods, you can see I've broken up that slab of silver. But one of the last things I'm going to do is pick out some panels like I did with underneath. So I'm going to create a light grey using Tamiya paints and make a very thin wash, and then just pick out the odd access panel here and there. So now I'm at that stage which I dread. I don't like decaling at the best of times, no matter how good they look. And these extra decal ones look very good. So I've added the stencils from the Classic Airframe kit, and I was about to add the Classic Airframe roundels, and then I found that they looked far too big. No matter where I positioned them or where they should go, they seem to overlap on the aileron. So scratching my head, I thought I'd use the Airfix roundels, but they were the same diameter. So I'm running around like a headless chicken trying to think what to do next. So I'm quickly looking through my stash of decals, and I come across, thankfully, some 1/48 scale Hunter roundels. They seem to be spot on diameter wise, and even the blue looks right. So I should use the Hunter roundels for the wing and for the side fuselage as well. So the decals went down beautifully, both sets, the Classic Airframe and the extra decals. So the next thing I want to do is seal the decals underneath, and I'll do that with a coat of Tamiya satin varnish. Now I can't seal the decals on top, not with the varnishes I have, because they'll change the tonal effect of the silver. So having sealed everything in with the Tamiya satin varnish, you can see on the central fuel tank where it's dulled the silver. But you can see why I didn't apply the varnish to the top. I'd have got the same effect. You can also see where I've added a panel wash. I've used a Flores Dark Dirt wash. And after letting the undersurfaces rest and settle down for a few days, I'm going to start adding a bit of grime. I'm using burnt umber and lamp black. So by masking off certain areas and adding the all neat, very sparingly, don't need a lot, and then blending it in with a dry, stiff brush. Quick and easy, as you can see. So I'm going to use the same method all over the lower surface. So I've gone as far as I want with the weathering underneath. You can get carried away, and it's busy under here as it is. So I've switched the main light off just so you can get a better look. So with adding the rear tail planes, there was a slight hairline gap. So by masking off and protecting the paint, and then filling in with some Vallejo putty, and then wiping the excess off, the seam's gone. Don't even have to add paint. Now one of the last major things I need to add is this, what they call a target bridle. I think that's what they call it. So you can see all the parts I've created. I may have to add more, but I've got the basic shapes all here. The problem I've got now is, will it all go together? Because it's all been done by eye. So I need to make sure I make a good datum point or a good starting point, because if I get it wrong, it has a knock-on effect with all the other parts. So looking at a couple of good photographs, well I say good, they give a good idea of location of parts. I've started off with the first front shoots. Once I'm happy with that, once again all by eye. Now I know these shoots locate just below the roundel on the fuselage, or roughly around that area. So once I've got my datum point and I'm reasonably happy, I've got to go for it now and just hope for the best. And as you can see here, I've added the piston and all the parts are painted. So from that layout there, I've got to try and add these two shafts which go out to the rear flap, and then from the flap to the side of the fuselage. And I'm sorry I'm not videoing this, but there's going to be a lot of faffing about and a lot of trimming here and there. So that's the scaffolding all added. I'm reasonably happy with it. It's not 100% accurate, as I said. There are a few points here and there that really aren't technically right, but it gives that impression. So overall, I'm very happy with the build. Quite a lot of work involved, and like any model, it had its ups and downs. There are a few discrepancies here and there, especially that pylon. It should really taper out in profile. But other than that, I'm very happy with the overall effect, and I hope you like it too. So I want to thank you for watching, and I do hope to see you for the next video.